just 32. 37. Okay. So you can see the amount of poison ticks could get up pretty high. Like, the build has the damage. Like, damage is not a problem with this. I think it's just that survivability would be maybe a concern with the build. Oh, this is actually blasting. This is just a Sigil 100 boss, but watch what we can do. So we'll go ahead and throw this down, throw the poison trap, and then watch once he's staggered. We're not close enough. There we go. Now we're a lot closer. And the reason why is because it's getting hit by all 3 of the blades now. I don't even need to do anything. He's already dead. You can see the ticks over here, and we're just starting out. This build could get way, 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 way stronger. Alright guys, let's hop right into it. This is going to be one of the best melee rogue builds in the entire game for Season 4, which is essentially going to be a Puncture / Flurry / Andariel's Visage build. Now, just as a warning, as a heads up, if you do not have the unique item Andariel's Visage, this build does not work. That is very important. So, even though you can technically use this at 35, I'm going to consider this mainly an endgame only build because it requires you to get a lot of pieces of gear, and once you start masterworking, this build actually does get quite strong. I actually learned about this build from Xarrio as well as Wudi, and the thing that I do want to mention also that's very important is that the aspect of Retribution is actually getting some stats that you're normally not supposed to get. And what that stat is in the second part of it where it says you deal more damage to stunned and knocked down enemies. That is apparently double dipping. You're getting the bonus multiple times. And again, if this does get nerfed, well, the build isn't going to feel as good. So I would suggest if you guys don't have Andariel's already, watch the gameplay, see how it plays, and decide for yourself if you want to actually invest time into this build, as it's not going to just be, oh, grab your Heartseeker gear and just swap right over. Because instead of getting vulnerable damage, what you need to be looking for on a lot of pieces of gear is going to be specifically getting the damage to crowd-controlled enemies, which technically doesn't really roll on your items you temper it on. So if maybe you're bored of the Heartseeker, you can convert your Heartseeker items basically over, but at that point you're really committing, because if you don't get to reroll again back to the vulnerable damage, well, then you've kind of bricked your gear. But this is just something that I've been playing on the stream, and some people wanted the build guide, so I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and drop it. But overall, is this build going to be better than Heartseeker? No. At the moment, Heartseeker is still pretty much the top tier build, but that is a ranged build, and a lot of people want to play a melee rogue. Like myself, I really like Twisting Blades, but Twisting Blades just doesn't have the numbers that it used to. So what does all of our damage is going to be on Andariel's Visage. So what we're going to do is stack Lucky Hit so we can activate this as often as possible. So instead of running Victimize with the Lucky Hit, well, we're just using Andariel's. And to actually scale Andariel's damage even further, we can run Close Quarters on the skill tree, and that's going to give us way more damage with Andariel's. So even though you may be able to roll some of the pieces over from Heartseeker, it's still pretty much a Lucky Hit based build. But you do want to stay within melee range, even though some of the skills that kind of activate our damage, like Puncture over here, you can throw them, but you need to be within melee range because the Andariel's pops wherever your character's at, not where the actual projectiles go. So that's why you are seeing me in melee range, and that is because within melee range, you're going to be able to throw these 3 daggers and all of them hit the target. Usually once that thing is actually in the stagger bar for any of the bosses, we'll start going higher up in the pit. But the boss will start just draining their HP so fast, and you'll see as we go higher tiers into the pit, once the enemy takes enough damage, I could just walk away. They're just going to go ahead and die from the poison damage over time. So that said, let's go ahead and hop right into the skills as well as the itemization as well as skill tree and Paragon Board. For starters, let's go ahead and go over the skills. So Puncture is how we are going to be activating Lucky Hit chance, and it actually has every third one can apply a Poison Imbue, which can actually trigger one of our things on the Paragon Board for even more damage. That was something that I kind of varied from Wudi's build because, again, I saw them. It was Xarrio and Wudi, so shout out to them for like kind of making this build. And then I decided to go ahead and play it myself because I happened to get Andariel's Visage, and well, I should have just maybe salvaged it. I'm kind of glad I didn't, because now I can play with this. It's the only real way to make use of really a melee rogue build, and it is not super far behind. It's not like, oh, it has like, 1/10 of the DPS that, let's say, Heartseeker has like other melee rogue builds. This one's actually pretty solid. Just as a heads up, you're going to have to masterwork a lot just to get it up and running to where it feels really good, even close to Heartseeker. But the clear speed is just not the same because it's a damage over time build. It takes like a second or two before you get the big damage anyways. So, Flurry is actually utilized for combo points to give you increased attack speed, but it can also spread vulnerability if you want to utilize it for that. It also activates your cutthroat skill, so it actually does a ton of things. Then Caltrops is going to give you additional damage, and then we are running Poison Trap over here so we can knock down the enemies, because that is going to increase our crit technically, but we also get the daze. We can actually daze the enemies, so that'll activate another crowd control. And then we have dash for mobility and shadow step. So basically, you use poison traps on elites or caltrops, but in the lower tier content, you don't really need to use it. You could just basically spam down Puncture, and then once you build up the combo points, every 3 seconds you activate Flurry, and it's going to give you an insane amount of attack speed. You will easily reach 100% without really even trying to roll attack speed on all your pieces of gear. But next up over here, what we're going to be talking about is the itemization. So yeah, combo points for the specialization, just for more attack speed. It's just because you don't really need crit in this build, because the poison damage, attack speed, normally for dot damage, you don't need to get attack speed or crit, but in this build, you still want attack speed because it is tied to your ability to actually throw out more of these daggers that are off of lucky hit, even though Andariel's does all of the damage. So Andariel's, you need it. It's required. Next up, ranks to Dark Shroud, and then getting the Umbrous aspect is kind of key over here. Then for the temporary mods, just look for some sort of stuff with like lucky hit chance to freeze or stun, slow. Any of those things are kind of good, but at least one thing needs to be freeze and ideally one stun. And then Pestilent points. This is where my build differs a little bit from some of the other ones that I've seen. So what we're running is Pestilent points. So every third cast of Puncture is going to be Poison Imbue. Now that doesn't really matter for damage. It's just that it activates Poison Imbue, because that actually does activate in the Paragon board for the bonus damage when you activate a imbued skill. You get bonus damage to that. So it's going to increase your poison damage. And then we are also running the aspect of Might over here. So this is going to give us some extra damage reduction. And then we can run Shared Misery, or you can run a lot of different things here. There's like extra bonus damage to enemies affected by, like, let's say the Grenade. There's a lot of other things that you can run, but I really like Shared Misery. And then aspect of Retribution. Again, this is how we're going to get a lot of our damage. And mostly all the pieces of gear, you're looking for attack speed, lucky hit chance. You can get damage over time, you can get raw damage. Any of those stats are pretty good, but the crowd control is the most important thing that you want to temper on every single piece of gear. And then for Amulet, adaptability. So you can see there's a lot of overlap between this build as well as the build with the Heartseeker. So you're just looking for basically the same sort of things. Exploit, Frigid Finesse, Deadly Venom is a different one though. Deadly Venom is on the skill tree over here, and we'll talk a little about that in a second. And then we have the Edgemasters aspect for even more damage, because we don't use resource. Then Moonrise, so we can attack even faster. And then we have Inner Calm, so we get more damage on the bosses. And then we are also running the Rapid aspect over here. If you don't want to run Pestilent points, you can also run Elements. That's another thing that you can swap for. And then for the gems, you can run Amethyst, or you can run Sapphire. Sapphire technically gives you just a little bit more damage. And what's nice with this build is this skill, Puncture, already applies vulnerable as well as a slow. So it already does like all the things for you. Which is awesome. So everything is always going to be vulnerable for the most part. And then, of course, rubies and diamonds is kind of like the standard thing for every single build. Now, as far as skill tree, this is where it gets way different. So remember, we're not dealing damage with our Puncture. We're using it to proc lucky hit chance. So even though it only has 35, we can actually get that to activate 3 different times. Also, another important thing to temper on is getting that chance for Puncture projectiles to cast twice. It's basically the exact same as Heartseeker. You just want your projectiles to activate twice. So you're basically getting 6 every single time that you're throwing these out. That's why Puncture is the go-to versus, let's say, Heartseeker. Plus, you have to play within melee range anyways for the thing to activate. So sitting super far back with Heartseeker wouldn't really help. And then this is optional here. If you want more survivability, you can run Siphoning Strikes. You also don't have to play Stutter Step. I really like it myself. You can put more points into the poison stuff if you want to over here. That can also give you another form of damage reduction. It's kind of up to you and what you want to go ahead and go for. But the most important thing really, as far as the poison one goes, is getting Deadly Venom up. But you don't have to put points into Alchemic Advantage if you don't want to. I'll talk more about that in a second. But basically, if you want more survivability, you can move some points out of other things. Or if you don't really need the additional movement speed, because you can actually get 200% movement speed quite easy if you masterwork with the bonus movement speed per Dark Shroud that you have. And because you don't need crit, you could actually run the movement speed one instead. Or you can run the crit one. Again, there's like so many options here. Because when you do have the ability to, after knocking back or knocking down an enemy, you gain increased crit here. And when you crit a dazed enemy, that's why crit can matter a little bit in this build, where when you crit a dazed enemies, they're then knocked down, and then you get that huge, massive bonus damage. So even though you don't need crit technically for the damage, like crit chance, the retribution gives you more damage to knock down and stunned enemies. So get stunned somewhere as well if you want to, so it can give you way, way more damage. So ideally, you just have both apply, and then you get crazy amounts of damage. And then we're running Caltrops. I really like Shadow Step to have the ability to become unstoppable. It's really great. And then we just have extra mobility. And then obviously Dark Shroud. And then it's optional if you want to play Smoke Grenade. I put points into here, and how I would play it is let me go, we have to click where it says edit over here. So if I didn't want to play this, and it's up to you if you want to play the Smoke Grenade or not, because it just makes them take more damage from you. You can see I don't have it in my bar, but it is another optional thing that you can mess around with. But the most important thing is really just getting that Deadly Venom. That's like the other thing that you definitely want to go up, but it's kind of up to you. Do you want more damage reduction? That's fine too. Another awesome thing that you can grab. So if you want to play that, that's fine, but I really do like Poison Trap, and that is because you get additional damage to the knockdown enemies. Well, there's another one over here that you can put another point into. So if you want to remove a point here, or if you have like an additional point and you may, let's say you don't want to run Shadow Step, or you don't need the extra Siphoning Strike. Okay, that's another option. There's so many options that I've seen with this build, but there's another 10x that you can get with a Poison Trap that can increase your damage as well over there. Then Frigid Finesse is kind of like standard, and then you just get haste. And then obviously we are not going to be playing Victimize here. This is the actual difference. We're going to be getting close quarters. So over here, you'll see that when we damage an enemy with a marksman or cutthroat skill, we're going to gain 15% attack speed bonus for 8 seconds. That's each. So you want to activate a marksman skill and a cutthroat. So what you're going to do is you're going to build up your combo points, then activate Flurry. Now, you don't need to do that every single time. This build is crazy fast. So you don't have to go 3 combo points, activate Flurry. You don't have to just keep on doing that again and again like you normally would with most combo point builds. It depends how close, those enemies are. Like if it's super far away, you can just actually activate your combo points and activate Flurry. It doesn't actually have to hit a target. Now, to actually build up the combo points, it does need to hit a target, but barrels can actually count as targets, or anything in the game that's indestructible will actually activate a combo point. But again, Flurry does not need to actually hit a target when you spend the combo points to get the bonus of increased attack speed. It gives you 45% attack speed, which is crazy. That's basically almost like 2 aspects in that scenario. So that's what we're going to be doing for the skill tree. Now that we've went over that, let's go ahead and go over the Paragon board. So I'll make this much bigger so it's easier to see, and I'll also include it down below because I was looking at your guys' feedback. Sometimes I know it's kind of hard to see like this, but these are the glyphs that we're going to be running. We can run Bane, Devious, Canny, Exploit, Control, and Tracker. So for on the starter board, I am going to be opting for the Bane. So we're going to put Bane at the start, and then we're going to move up to the next one, which is going to be Cheap Shot and Devious. Go zoom in a little bit more here so it's easier to see. So we go to Cheap Shot, Devious, and then we go into Exploit, Weakness, Canny, and then we have Tricks of the Trade, Exploit, and we have later on as Instinct / Control, and then we have Eldritch Bounty, Tracker. This is where it differs from other builds that I've seen. I really like this one just because it gives you that full uptime versus the Activate Trap every single time you want to get good damage, because this is just going to be up 100% of the time. Plus it gives you extra defenses because poison damage in this game, it just still feels relatively nasty. Sometimes, I'm sure you guys notice when you start getting like that poison dot, or technically there's also shadow dot, when your HP just starts draining like crazy and you have to pop potions again and again. It kind of helps out with that, so I do like having that. Again, getting that additional maximum resistance is quite good. I mean, if you want to combo with Tyraels, you could do stuff, but then you lose out on the ranks to Dark Shroud, which is basically like an absolute no-go for the build. But this pretty much wraps up my build guide for this. I'm curious if you have played it, what do you think of it, or after watching the gameplay, do you guys have any interest in this build? For me personally, it was kind of a fun side project because some people were asking, have I seen this build? And like I said, I was going to build it anyways, actually with the Shred Druid, because Blurred Beast was something that I kind of liked, and unfortunately that thing got nerfed. So at least now there's something to go ahead and mess around with. If you have Andariels, there's a build for you, and it's technically one of the best melee rogue builds. And I probably should put that in kind of quotations here, because you do technically use Flurry and you are within melee range, and it's the only melee rogue build that isn't like absolutely terrible. But I think they need to look at buffing the like Twisting Blades and Flurry. Flurry specifically, the Flurry Stun Grenade build, I haven't seen anyone talk about it. I already dropped the build guide of that. If you guys want to see that, I'll link it down below. That was from the PTR. But strangely enough, they decided out of everything to actually nerf the build. when it actually needed a massive buff. But nonetheless, that's the build, guys. If you guys have any questions, you guys can let me know down below. And if you want to push way higher, I know like I was slowly ramping up in the gameplay here, but I'm pretty much finished with the build guide. You can go up into like 90s-ish. If you really want to start pushing, you're going to need like triple affix gear for this one. It's not as forgiving as Heartseeker because of the survivability. It really comes down to semi a skill issue, but there's sometimes times where an enemy will just hit you and you're frozen, and like if you don't happen to have your shadow step, well, you're dead. And I didn't really like that feeling, whereas Heartseeker, it just played a lot safer because it's a ranged build. But nonetheless, that's the build. If you guys have any questions, let me know down below. But if you enjoyed it and this is the first time here, hit subscribe, turn on that bell if you'd like to see more. And once again, big shout outs to Xarrio and Wudi, as I got huge inspiration from their like original ideas from this build. Anyways, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.